Okay, welcome back to Real Shift. My name's Joe. Today I'm going to be talking about Season 3, Episode 2 of Westworld. If you didn't see my Episode 1 review, please go check that out. I'm basically just going to be recapping everything that happened, giving you my thoughts on what happened. If you like what you hear, please like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, you know the deal. So we'll get right into it. Before I actually get into what the major things that happened in this episode, I want to talk for a second about the crossover, which seems to be a major talking point for most people about this episode. Because Benioff and Weiss, the writers, creators, whatever you want to call it, of the Game of Thrones TV show, both made an appearance in this episode, as did Drogon, the dragon. And I thought that was a nice cool little crossover. Apparently they had been planning it for some time, the Westworld creators, and I thought it was really subtle and it wasn't like too much in your face, and it made sense, to be quite honest. And it also gave me the idea that perhaps, maybe, somehow, that season 8 of Game of Thrones, the much controversial season, maybe wasn't actually Game of Thrones. Maybe it was just a bad simulation in one of the Westworld parks. But overall, like I said, it was good to see a Game of Thrones reference, because I know Game of Thrones has experienced a lot of backlash, especially after the last season, but it's still a great show, and it's cool to see it cross over with another great show, to be quite honest. So I really enjoyed that. But on to the actual meat and potatoes of this episode. This episode is very Maeve-centric. She was not in the first episode at all, so it was refreshing to kind of see her here once again. I believe the last time we saw Maeve, she was either dead or presumed dead. But in this particular episode, she's introduced and she's caught in this narrative loop once again, much like you would have seen in Westworld Season 1. But instead of it being Westworld, she's actually in Warworld, which is a World War II themed, I guess, attraction. And it got me thinking, like, if Warworld is an actual thing, which later you come to realize it's not in this particular, but I believe it was actually in another episode of Westworld, so it does exist, or did exist, before the robot uprising. So if you were someone to attend Warworld, like, what would you do there? Could you be a Nazi? Because that's pretty dark when you think about it. Like, I know these parks are about indulging in your fantasies, but would they actually allow you to be a Nazi and go in and just kill people? I guess they would, but that's a pretty dark and disturbing thought that people could actually pay to do that. But I guess that's the world that Westworld is in, to be honest. But as far as this particular episode, she comes in contact with the narrative specialist Lee from the previous seasons, and basically through the course of certain events she starts to realize something isn't quite right with what's going on. Maeve's gifts are gone pretty much in this world. Remember, she was special at the end of last season. She had like these abilities that no other host had, but she doesn't have them here. So that was the first clue that something wasn't quite right. Her interactions with Lee are a bit strange and awkward. It's insinuated that he is somehow in love with her, and that was never really a thing, and she kind of realizes that that's off about him, that he must not be real, because he would be helping her just to help her, not because he's in love with her, and she even says that very line. There's another instance, it's a small instance, where she sees two other hosts and she's confused about why they don't recognize who she is, and that was another clue, I guess. So through the course of this, she starts to realize that this is in fact not real. It's a simulation. And they do show it in minor parts. They show like little glitches, the screen flickering, stuff like that. The background flickering, I should say. And yeah, so they do a really creative way of like showing that this world might not be real. And it's real subtle, and it's really well done, to be honest. But she kind of discovers that the whole thing is a simulation, and she uses that to her advantage. And basically she manipulates that system to try to get what she wants out of it, or to get her freedom, or to figure out what's going on. So basically she comes to the realization eventually, after she meets the new character, who is called Serac, I believe. She realizes that this whole simulation was pretty much designed to get information out of her about Dolores, about the Forge, and about the Sublime. Now, if you don't remember, the Forge is where all the guest information was stored, and the Sublime is where is like a cyber, I guess, oasis where the host consciousness could go and live freely. So yeah, they're trying to get information out of Maeve to see what she knows about all this, because she was obviously very connected to Westworld and the whole system within Westworld because of her abilities. So they're trying to get information out of her, but she gradually figures out that this is like a simulation, and she uses that information to manipulate that system. And eventually she finds a way to hack the system, and she hacks outside of the system. She hacks basically a service droid, I guess you could say. And she hacks the service droid, takes control of it, and she actually removes her CPU from the system and tries to escape through this service droid. It's eventually shot down, and I guess her CPU is kind of left up in the air, like we're not really told immediately what happens to it. We find out later on in the episode. And that's where Sirach comes in. He's basically this, I guess, tech genius. He's developed the supercomputer, and we find out that basically he is trying to get information out of Maeve, because what Dolores is doing with the robot uprising is essentially disrupting his system in the supercomputer, and this is like his way of getting information out of Maeve, and then he eventually even insists that he wants Maeve to kill Dolores. So it's basically him playing Maeve against Dolores and trying to get, I guess, her to go along with his plan, with what benefits him. And it's funny because another character, obviously Bernard, one of the main characters in the story, has a similar plan now. Because when we see Bernard in this episode, he is returning to Westworld. He goes down in the bunker under Ford's, I believe it's under Ford's shop, and you see all the replicants or all the different versions of Bernard that were created. And he finds Ashley, who is the third Hemsworth, if you don't know who that is. And he's down there. Basically, he tried to commit suicide, I guess, but he missed, and he's malfunctioning. So Bernard takes it upon himself to fix him and reprogram him, basically to be his protector, be his bodyguard. And I thought that was really interesting because it was bringing the character of Bernard full circle. Like, yes, he's got like this whole new personality, or literally a whole another side to his personality now, with the whole switch thing where he can just flick a switch and he turns into this badass beat 'em up robot. But he also still has those Bernard instincts to, I guess, want to help the hosts and I guess to fix them. But he also has a little bit of selfishness to him because he actually reprograms him, like I said, to benefit him. So this is a different Bernard we're seeing, but we're also seeing a Bernard kind of coming full circle, and I really dug that about what we saw of him. And there wasn't a whole lot to him, but he does hack into the system again of Westworld, and through all the course of what goes on, he basically comes to the realization also that Dolores needs to be stopped, and the only one who can do that is Maeve. And so we have two different characters coming to the same conclusion. They want the same exact thing, and presumably they're going to try to convince Maeve to stop Dolores on her crusade against humanity, which I think is a really good idea from a standpoint of storytelling, because one of the major issues of season 2 is that people felt it was convoluted. Like, there's too much going on, not really sure where it's going. And in this particular case, now we have a clear directive about where we're going. And I think that's really important, and I think that's going to help this season probably be more well received than maybe season 2 was for some people. I like all of them, but I know some people didn't like season 2. So overall, I really enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed the World stuff. The whole idea of whether things are real or not is clearly going to be an overarching thing throughout the course of the season. I don't mean just in a sense of being theme parks. I mean in a sense of what's a simulation and what's not. Because again, I even think the real world they were insinuating that even the real world that Dolores is a part of might be a simulation as well. So that's going to be an overarching thing, and they're just doing a really good job of giving each individual character time to shine, and I think that's important in a show like this with so many good characters. So overall, I really enjoyed this episode. I think they're definitely on the right track, and yeah, I can't wait to see where it goes next. If you guys saw it, please let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. As always, please like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you next week for episode 3. Thanks for watching.